Hi, my name is Doug Fields, and I have been a youth pastor for decades, and I am so excited to share with you 10 tips for being a great volunteer at camp or any special event. And my goal is to give you all 10 of these tips in about 10 minutes. Many years ago, I was sitting in a seminary class learning about one of the most influential Christian educators and authors of the 20th century by the name of Henrietta Mears. And Henrietta lived from 1890 to 1963, and she was an amazing leader. And maybe you haven't heard of her, but you've probably heard of Campus Crusade or Cru and Young Life. And she had a profound impact on those who founded those ministries, ones that are still booming today. Henrietta founded Gospel Light Publishing and a camp and conference center that I've been to many times in Southern California called Forest Home. And as we were studying her philosophy of camps, I remember being blown away by one of the statements she said. She said this: "A teenager can learn more about God during a weekend retreat than sitting in a Sunday school class for an entire year." And I thought, wow, that is a pretty bold statement. And I'm not exactly sure how you'd verify the validity of that statement, but I have enough youth ministry intuition to know that she was definitely onto something. Because there's just something mysterious and powerful that happens during a weekend retreat or a camp or even a one-night special event that can serve as a catalytic spiritual moment for a teenager. Something changes when you get students away from the routine and you surround them with fun and laughter and great people and the words of Jesus. And I'm a big believer that lives can be changed during these types of activities, and most of the time the change is for the good. Although occasionally I've experienced an adult volunteer who experiences change, like, he changes his mind about being a volunteer after staying up all night at a lock-in or being forced to be in a cabin with 13 junior high boys. But most of the time the change is a good thing, a spiritual change or a transformation of the heart. But these life changes don't happen if these events don't take place. And these events don't take place without people like you, caring adults, who are willing to say yes to Jesus and to liking teenagers and being a part of these camps and special event type experiences. And I'm not sure what kind of event or camp that you're preparing to go on to next, but here are my 10 fairly universal tips for doing your part as a volunteer in making these events successful. Number 1, remember, this is the student's trip. See, our job as leaders is to make it about the teenager, and we can do this by modeling servant leadership and by putting students first. And you do this by hanging out more with teenagers than you hang out with other adults. That you look out for those teenagers who might be disconnected or feel lonely. You try to include them in conversations or activities and do what you do best to help them on this trip or this camp and let them know that this event is for them. Look for activities that excite them, not just what excites you. Number 2, attitude is everything. I mean, there are a few things that can destroy a camp or a special event, like negative adult leaders. So please stay positive and free from complaining. Yes, sure, things could be run better, and yes, there's going to be some goofy things that are going to happen that you wish they wouldn't have planned, but that's youth ministry. So relax, don't complain, especially don't complain to teenagers. And if you do complain, you seek out the primary leader and talk to him or her privately. Better yet, how about this? Don't complain at all. Instead, be positive and supportive. Critique can come later. A great positive attitude makes for a great event. Number 3, know where your students are at all times. See, my style of leadership is to make sure all my leaders have a few teenagers who they're loosely assigned to oversee or shepherd or connect with. And in doing so, it's important for these adults to know where kids are and have an idea of what they're doing. The idea of MIA, or missing in action, shouldn't come into play at a camp or a youth ministry event. And I'm not saying you have to be with them 24/7, but you need to have a general idea of where they are or what they're doing. One of my worst moments in youth ministry was when I had to explain to a parent that we, lost their kid in Mexico for an entire afternoon. Anyway, another story for another time. Know where your kids are. Number 4, realize that you are being watched. Now, this is Youth Ministry 101. You're being watched by the teenagers you're discipling. They're watching everything. They're watching how you interact with others, how you treat people, how you worship and participate or don't participate in the games. They're watching your attitude. They're watching your response to others. And I know it doesn't seem fair, but that's what you signed up for, or at least what you were recruited into. So be careful about participating in gossip or pranks or jokes that are targeted at others, because kids are going to follow your lead. And as a leader, there's just a higher standard that you're being held to. Young eyes are watching you. Number 5, don't be afraid to discipline. Now, in my experience, this tip is received by 2 different types of people. The first type is those who, they love rules. I mean, they have dreamt about being a police officer, and they hear, don't be afraid to discipline, and they think, that's exactly right. This is my opportunity. This is why I signed up to be a youth worker. And the second type of person hears this, don't be afraid to discipline, and they think, I hate being the bad guy. And I get it. I've seen both types. Now, the first type, the cop, this principle really isn't for you. You don't have any problem with this. For you, I'd say actually relax, loosen up a little bit on the kids and let them be kids. Be appropriate with boundaries. But this tip is really for those of you who are a little afraid to discipline. Please, you can't expect the primary leader, the youth pastor, to do all the discipline. There are times when you need to step up with your leadership and say something like, hey guys, please stop doing that. You're being distracting. You know when kids are being rude or breaking rules, say something about it. If you have a relationship with them, that's actually ideal. And if you don't, you can speak words of truth with a tone of love in your voice and within your eyes. You can lovingly discipline. And if you need help or you're unsure about how to handle a situation, you need to call in for backup, you can ask your primary leader. That's all being a part of a team. See, we need each other to make the camp or the special event a success, and we may need you to discipline. Number 6, keep students safe. I mean, this principle applies in a lot of different ways, but especially let's talk about how you drive, okay? If you're driving kids in a car, your goal isn't to be their friend and impress them with how wild and crazy and funny your driving can be. Your goal is to be a caring adult who is safe. So as a youth pastor, I want to return kids to their family in a good condition, right? So let's go bigger than just the car here. If it's hot at camp, help them be safe by encouraging them to drink plenty of water, get food in their system. If it's cold, encourage them to wear their shoes in the snow, simple stuff like that. And I know safety isn't cool, but that's okay. Your job as a caring adult youth worker isn't to be cool. Your job is to be a good leader. Number 7, do something fun. Okay, say whether this is a late night run for a burger and ice cream, or if you're at an event where that's an appropriate option, or even just doing something extra or silly with your students, that's what creates memories. Some of the best connection points come during unscheduled, spontaneous times. Students know when an adult is obligated to be there, and they also know when adults really like them. And they're willing to have fun, bonding over junk food or embracing a game that they're playing, where you're going to be the worst. And that's okay. They're laughing at you. That's fine. All of that fun actually gives you relational capital that you can leverage during later conversations. Number 8, be prepared. If you know what kids you're going to be responsible for, do some homework about them without being too invasive, but find out about their family, their school, what they're into, where they're at spiritually and emotionally and relationally. It's just so much easier to minister to someone when you know what's going on in his or her world. Number 9, know your limits. Face it. Just because you're surrounded by teenagers doesn't mean you are a teenager. You don't have to do everything that they're doing to be a successful leader. If you have a bad back, you probably shouldn't be doing the water blob or taking their backward cartwheels challenge, okay? You should know your limits when it comes to dealing with students, and don't feel like you have to solve every problem on your own. I mean, if there's a situation that's above your ability or your wisdom, seek some help. See, good leaders know their limits. And finally, number 10, make the main thing the main thing. I mean, if a student comes to camp or participates in all the games and stays in proper dress code and sings all the songs and goes to bed at lights out, but doesn't know any more about Jesus at the end of the event, that's not a win. See, we don't do camp or events to simply entertain kids. We do them as a vehicle for them coming closer to Jesus. That if a student sits on the sidelines and keeps his hands in his pockets and never smiles, but actually leaves camp knowing and loving Jesus in a more intimate way, that's a big win. And the main goal of camps and special events is to connect teenagers to the radical love that God has for them. Everything else is secondary. Okay, now, I know That was a lot of tips. And hopefully the time you spent thinking about some of these will help prepare your heart and your mind and your attitude to love teenagers in a more confident and caring way. And as always, thanks for doing what you do.